For over 7 decades, the American financial playbook was simple, predictable, and practically guaranteed. You went to university, secured a stable corporate job, saved 20% of your paycheck, and purchased a suburban starter home. That single property was not just shelter, it was the ultimate engine of middle-class wealth accumulation. It was where forced savings met steady equity growth, building the foundation for financial freedom for generations of working families. But today, that traditional playbook is not just outdated, it is mathematically broken. Meet Julian. Julian is 32 years old, works as a senior software manager, and earns $180,000 per year. On paper, Julian is doing everything right. He sits squarely in the top 10% of individual income earners in the United States. He has pristine credit, zero credit card debt, and lives frugally in a modest rented apartment. 4 years ago, Julian set a firm goal to buy his first home, a modest 3-bedroom starter house listed at $350,000. He calculated that saving $70,000 for a 20% down payment would take him roughly 3 years of disciplined budgeting. Julian achieved his goal. He saved $80,000 in cash. But when he stepped back into the housing market, he discovered a terrifying reality. That exact same starter home was no longer $350,000. It was now priced at $520,000. Even worse, the interest rate on a standard 30-year fixed mortgage had climbed from 3% to over 7.5%. In 4 years of hard work, saving, and sacrifice, Julian had not moved closer to homeownership. He had been pushed exponentially further away. Now contrast Julian with Marcus. Marcus is 35 years old and owns no traditional primary residence in his personal name. Yet, Marcus controls a portfolio of 12 single-family residential properties, generating over $15,000 per month in net cash flow. Marcus did not buy these properties with standard 30-year bank mortgages. He did not save 20% down payments for each transaction, nor did he compete in emotional bidding wars against regular homebuyers. While Julian is trapped on the outside looking in, Marcus is actively building a real estate dynasty using financial mechanics that the average buyer was never taught to see. To understand why Julian is trapped and why Marcus is thriving, we have to look past superficial headlines about inflation or construction delays. We must analyze the fundamental restructuring of the American housing market, a transformation that has converted single-family shelter from a consumer equity asset into an institutional income generator. For the first time in modern history, everyday homebuyers are no longer just competing against other families down the street. They are competing against multi-billion-dollar private equity funds, corporate debt mechanics, and systemic banking policies designed to keep capital flowing upward. Let us look at the raw mechanics of purchasing power. The affordability of real estate is governed by 3 primary variables: asset price, interest rates, and median household income. Historically, the median price of an American home hovered around 3 to 4 times the median annual household income. In 1980, when mortgage rates hit historic highs of 16%, median home prices remained low relative to incomes, allowing buyers to accumulate equity quickly as interest rates eventually declined over the following decades. Today, that economic balance is completely fractured. The median home price in the United States has expanded to over 6 times the median household income, while in major metropolitan areas, that ratio exceeds 8 to 10 times annual earnings. When you pair elevated asset prices with surging interest rates, the mathematical result is catastrophic for cash wage earners. Consider the exact payment mechanics on a $400,000 mortgage loan. At a 3% fixed interest rate on a 30-year mortgage, the principal and interest payment sits at approximately $1,686 per month. Now, take that exact same $400,000 mortgage loan at a 7.5% interest rate. The monthly principal and interest payment leaps to $2,796 per month. That represents an increase of over $1,100 per month, or a 66% jump in monthly borrowing costs for the exact same physical structure. But the financial bleeding does not stop there. Because home valuations artificially spiked over a short time frame, municipal property tax assessments followed closely behind. At the same time, property insurance premiums surged by 30 to 50% in key markets due to rising construction material costs and climate reinsurance pressures. When Julian adds property taxes, home insurance, maintenance reserves, and community fees to his projected ledger, His total monthly housing expense for a basic starter home climbs from $2,200 per month to over $4,300 per month. To safely afford a $4,300 monthly housing payment under conservative banking guidelines, Julian must allocate nearly 50% of his net take-home salary purely to keeping a roof over his head. Despite earning $180,000 per year, Julian is reduced to living paycheck to paycheck the moment he signs a mortgage deed. This brings us to the second structural pillar of the housing collapse, the institutional capitalization of single-family homes. Following the financial crisis of 2008, sovereign wealth funds, private equity firms, and public real estate investment trusts realized something profound. Single-family homes, historically owned by millions of fragmented mom and pop buyers, represented a massive untapped asset class that could yield stable, inflation-hedged rental returns. When Wall Street entities enter a residential market, they do not operate like Julian. Julian must apply for a mortgage, wait 30 to 45 days for loan underwriting, pay thousands in bank closing costs, and submit an offer contingent on an appraisal. An institutional buyer, on the other hand, operates with massive credit facilities, corporate bond issuances, and pooled equity. They submit cash offers with zero contingencies, closing in 7 days or less, often buying entire housing developments in single bulk transactions. When an institutional buyer enters a growing suburb or metro area, they establish an artificial price floor. If a residential property is listed at $400,000, the institutional buyer can easily pay $420,000 in cash, knowing that they can rent the property out to workers like Julian who have been priced out of buying. The institutional fund monetizes both sides of the equation. They drive up purchase prices to eliminate consumer competition and then charge top-tier rental rates to the exact same families who were forced to remain renters. This creates a perpetual capital extraction machine. The working professional pays inflated rent to an institutional landlord, reducing their ability to save a down payment for their own home. Meanwhile, the institutional landlord uses that exact rental income to service corporate debt and purchase the next wave of residential properties. The consumer is effectively paying for the very financial machine that is pricing them out of ownership. To see how deep this systemic disparity runs, we must examine the hidden divergence in how the United States tax code treats earned cash wages versus asset cash flow. Consider Julian's exact financial reality. Julian earns $180,000 per year through his corporate salary. Because his compensation is classified as ordinary W-2 wage income under federal tax law, it is subjected to immediate, automatic taxation at the highest marginal rates. Before Julian ever receives a single dollar in his bank account to pay rent or buy groceries, his income is sliced away. Federal income tax takes roughly $32,000. State income tax takes another $10,000. Federal Insurance Contributions Act taxes, covering Social Security and Medicare, strip away another $11,000. By the time the government finishes collecting its share, Julian's $180,000 gross salary shrinks to approximately $127,000 in actual net spendable liquidity. Now look at Marcus. Marcus generates $180,000 per year in gross rental distributions from his 12 single-family residential properties, the exact same gross income as Julian. But because Marcus's income is generated through real estate assets rather than personal labor, he operates under an entirely different set of statutory tax rules. Under Internal Revenue Code Section 168, residential real estate structures are allowed to be depreciated over a statutory lifespan of 27.5 years. On paper, the government assumes that the physical building is deteriorating and losing value every single year, even if the actual market value of the property is climbing rapidly due to local demand and monetary inflation. For a $400,000 property with a structure value of $330,000, standard linear depreciation provides Marcus with $12,000 per year in tax deductions for that single asset. Multiply that across 12 properties, and Marcus immediately wipes out $144,000 of gross rental income from his tax return without spending a single physical dollar out of his pocket. To eliminate his remaining taxable income entirely, Marcus employs an advanced tax planning tool known as a cost segregation study. Instead of depreciating the entire building structure over 27.5 years, Marcus hires a specialized engineering firm to inspect the properties. The engineers dissect the building into distinct physical components, separating carpet, lighting fixtures, cabinetry, land improvements, and exterior paving into 5-year, 7-year, and 15-year asset classes. By accelerating the depreciation schedule of these short-life assets into the early years of ownership, Marcus generates tens of thousands of dollars in additional bonus depreciation paper losses. When Marcus files his annual tax return, his accounting ledger reflects a net operating loss on paper. Yet, in the real world, Marcus deposits $180,000 of clean, spendable cash flow into his bank account. While Julian surrenders nearly $50,000 to the tax system, Marcus pays zero in federal income taxes, legally. This tax disparity creates an accelerating wealth gap between wage earners and asset controllers. Julian must earn nearly $2 in gross salary for every single dollar he spends on housing or down payment savings. Marcus, on the other hand, retains 100% of his cash flow to reinvest directly into acquiring more real estate. The wage earner is running on a financial treadmill where the taxes speed up with every raise, while the asset owner uses the tax code as a compounding acceleration engine. The inequality deepens when we analyze how Julian and Marcus access liquidity. When Julian wants to accumulate cash to purchase a home, he has only two options: work more hours to earn higher taxed wages, or cut his personal lifestyle to save post-tax dollars. If Julian manages to save $100,000 over 5 years, that capital represents money that has already been taxed at over 30%. When Marcus needs significant cash liquidity to acquire a new property, he never sells his existing assets. Selling a property triggers capital gains taxes and forfeits the recurring rental income. Instead, Marcus executes a cash-out refinance loan under Internal Revenue Code guidelines. Let us look at the precise mechanics of a cash-out refinance. Suppose one of Marcus's single-family properties was originally purchased for $300,000 and has appreciated in value to $500,000 due to neighborhood growth. Rather than liquidating the asset, Marcus applies for a commercial mortgage loan equal to 75% of the property's new appraised value, securing a new loan of $375,000. After paying off his remaining original loan balance of $220,000, Marcus receives a lump sum check for $155,000 in cold, hard cash. Under federal tax law, loan proceeds are classified as financial liabilities, not gross income. Because debt is not income, Marcus receives $155,000 completely tax-free. Marcus then takes that tax-free $155,000 and uses it as a down payment to acquire 2 additional residential properties. Meanwhile, the monthly tenant living in the original property pays a monthly rent that covers the entire principal, interest, taxes, and insurance on the new, higher mortgage loan. The tenant is effectively paying off Marcus's loan, while Marcus uses bank liquidity tax-free to expand his footprint. Julian uses post-tax wages to service debt on an asset that costs him money every month, while Marcus uses tenant capital to service debt on assets that put tax-free money in his pocket. When conventional mortgage interest rates spiked to 7.5%, everyday buyers like Julian were completely locked out because commercial banks tightened underwriting criteria and raised income requirements. But Marcus did not rely on traditional commercial bank mortgages to continue acquiring residential properties. Instead, Marcus moved entirely into seller financing and master lease options, bypassing retail banking friction altogether. Consider the mechanics of a seller finance transaction. In every real estate market, there are thousands of aging property owners who bought residential real estate decades ago for $50,000. These properties are now worth $400,000, but the owners are tired of managing maintenance, tenants, and property taxes. If these property owners sell their real estate outright in a traditional cash transaction, they face a massive capital gains tax bill that could eat up 30% of their profits. To avoid that massive tax hit, Marcus structures an installment sale under Internal Revenue Code Section 453. Instead of demanding a lump sum cash payment, Marcus offers to purchase the $400,000 property directly from the owner using a private seller note. Marcus provides a 10% down payment, $40,000 in cash, and signs a promissory note for the remaining $360,000 at a 5% fixed interest rate over a 20-year amortization schedule. This seller financing structure creates a mathematical win-win that completely bypasses the commercial banking industry. For the aging property owner, the tax liability is spread out over 20 years as payments are received, preventing them from being pushed into the highest capital gains tax bracket in a single year. Furthermore, the seller receives a reliable monthly check of $2,375, turning an illiquid physical property into a predictable income annuity backed by the real estate as collateral. For Marcus, the advantages are transformative. While Julian is struggling to qualify for a 7.5% mortgage from a commercial bank that requires endless tax returns, asset verifications, and strict debt-to-income ratios, Marcus locks in a 5% interest rate with zero bank underwriting fees. His monthly debt service payment is significantly lower than current market rates, leaving a higher net cash flow spread each month when the property is rented out to a tenant. When a property owner is unwilling to carry a seller note, Marcus deploys another flexible strategy known as a master lease option. Under a master lease structure, Marcus enters into an agreement to lease the entire property from the owner for a fixed monthly rate, say $2,000 per month, for a term of 5 years. The contract gives Marcus full operational control of the property, including the right to sublease the home to a residential tenant. Marcus then turns around and subleases the property to a qualified tenant for $2,800 per month. Marcus collects $2,800, pays the property owner $2,000, and pockets $800 per month in net positive cash flow spread. Marcus did not take out a bank mortgage, did not apply for a loan, and did not place a large down payment. Yet he controls the cash flow of the property completely legally. To secure his long-term upside, Marcus attaches a purchase option to the master lease contract. The option gives Marcus the exclusive right to purchase the property at any time during the 5-year term for a predetermined price of $400,000. If local real estate prices appreciate over those 5 years and the property becomes worth $500,000, Marcus exercises his option to buy at $400,000, instantly capturing $100,000 in equity. If the real estate market falls or stagnates, Marcus simply lets the option expire at the end of 5 years and walks away without taking any loss on equity. He collected $800 per month in risk-free cash flow for 60 consecutive months while taking on zero debt liability. This asymmetric risk profile is the exact opposite of Julian's position, where Julian takes on 100% of the mortgage debt liability and bears all market downside. To comprehend why this systemic division continues to widen every single year, we must examine the hidden impact of monetary inflation on fixed-rate debt versus cash savings. Most everyday consumers believe that inflation is simply an unfortunate increase in the price of eggs, gasoline, and healthcare. In reality, inflation is the gradual debasement of the currency caused by the continuous expansion of the broad money supply by central banking authorities. When the broad money supply expands by 8 to 12% annually, the purchasing power of every paper dollar held in a bank account declines. This monetary expansion hits wage earners like Julian with extreme severity. While Julian's corporate salary might increase by 3 to 5% during an annual performance review, his actual purchasing power is shrinking because asset prices and living costs are rising at double-digit rates. Julian's $80,000 in down payment savings sitting in a commercial savings account quietly loses real value every single day. For asset controllers like Marcus, monetary inflation operates as an invisible wealth transfer mechanism in his favor. When Marcus acquires a $400,000 property with fixed debt, two parallel financial processes take place simultaneously. First, the physical asset, the land and the building structure, inflates in nominal dollar terms alongside the broad money supply. As currency loses value, it takes more paper dollars to purchase the exact same physical housing asset. Second, and most importantly, the principal balance of Marcus's fixed-rate debt remains frozen in nominal terms. A $300,000 mortgage principal stays locked at $300,000, regardless of how much currency is printed by the central bank. As monetary inflation drives up nominal wages and general price levels over a 10 to 20-year horizon, the real economic burden of that fixed debt continuously shrinks. Consider what happens to Marcus's rental income during inflationary cycles. As general prices rise, Marcus adjusts residential lease agreements upward to match market conditions, raising rents from $2,000 to $3,000 per month over time. However, Marcus's fixed debt payment to the lender remains exactly the same, say $1,500 per month. The expanding gap between rising rental revenues and fixed debt service flows directly into Marcus's pocket as expanding cash flow margin. The tenant pays higher rent out of their inflation-eroded wages, and that rental cash flow pays down a fixed debt balance that is becoming cheaper in real terms every year. The borrower uses devalued future currency to satisfy historical debt, while the cash saver watches their capital evaporate. This brings us to the ultimate tax shielding mechanism deployed by sophisticated real estate investors, the Section 1031 tax deferred exchange. Under Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code, an investor can sell a real estate property that has experienced massive capital appreciation and defer 100% of federal and state capital gains taxes, provided the proceeds are reinvested into a like-kind replacement property of equal or greater value. Let us look at how Marcus executes this loop to compound his wealth exponentially. Suppose Marcus purchases a residential property for $300,000. Over 7 years, through a combination of market inflation and strategic property renovations, the property appreciates to $700,000, creating $400,000 in capital gains. If Julian held a similar appreciated asset and sold it outright, he would owe over $120,000 in combined federal and state capital gains taxes. Marcus, however, uses a qualified intermediary to execute a Section 1031 exchange. The entire $700,000 from the sale is directed into purchasing a small 12-unit apartment building worth $1.5 million. Marcus pays zero capital gains taxes on the $400,000 gain, rolls 100% of his equity into a far larger income-producing asset, and resets his depreciation schedule on a much higher cost basis. By resetting his depreciation schedule on a $1.5 million property, Marcus unlocks a brand new pool of paper tax losses, continuing his cycle of zero income tax liability while his rental revenue expands. But as an investor's portfolio grows, exposure to legal liability and predatory lawsuits increases exponentially. This brings us to the crucial asset protection matrix utilized by sophisticated real estate owners to make their wealth virtually untouchable. Consider Julian's position if he successfully purchased a primary residence. Julian holds the deed to his home directly in his personal name on public county land records. Anyone can search county property registries online and discover Julian's home address, estimated equity, and tax assessment. If Julian is involved in an auto accident or faces a personal lawsuit, his home equity stands as an exposed asset that can be attached, liens applied, or seized through court judgments. Marcus, by contrast, operates under a multi-layered asset protection structure that completely separates personal identity from legal ownership. First, Marcus holds legal title to each of his residential properties inside individual land trusts. The trustee listed on public county records is a private corporate entity, keeping Marcus's personal name completely absent from public databases. Second, the beneficial interest of each land trust is owned by a specialized legal entity, typically a Wyoming or Nevada Series limited liability company. States like Wyoming and Nevada offer statutory anonymity protections, meaning the state does not publicly publish the names of the managers or members of the company. A plaintiff attempting to sue Marcus cannot even identify what assets he controls. Furthermore, the series limited liability company structure provides crucial corporate firewalls between individual properties. Under a series structure, each property operates inside its own isolated cell, similar to individual compartments on a ship. If a tenant slips on icy steps at property number 1 and files a negligence lawsuit, the legal liability is strictly confined to the assets held within that specific series cell. The plaintiff cannot touch property number 2, property number 3, or the 12-unit apartment building, because each asset is legally shielded in a separate corporate compartment. Even if a creditor obtains a legal judgment against the entity, states with strong charging order protection laws limit the creditor's remedy solely to a charging order. A charging order gives the creditor a lien on potential cash distributions, but gives them zero authority to seize the underlying real estate, force a liquidation, or manage the business. Facing the prospect of expensive legal battles with zero ability to seize physical assets or force a payout, plaintiff attorneys almost always abandon claims or settle for minimal insurance payouts. Marcus has rendered his real estate portfolio functionally immune to predatory litigation, preserving his capital velocity uninterrupted. The final and most powerful component of this financial system lies in the multi-generational wealth transfer mechanics governing capital assets, specifically Section 114 of the Internal Revenue Code. This is where the ultimate divergence between cash wage earners and asset controllers is finalized. Consider what happens when Julian reaches the end of his life. After working for 40 years, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in income taxes, and saving what remained in cash and traditional retirement accounts, Julian leaves his remaining estate to his children. His cash savings have lost significant purchasing power to decades of inflation. Any funds remaining in traditional retirement accounts are subjected to deferred income taxes when withdrawn by his beneficiaries, and any real estate held in his personal name must pass through expensive, public probate court proceedings. Now look at what happens when Marcus passes away. Over his lifetime, Marcus accumulated millions of dollars in real estate assets, deferred hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital gains taxes through Section 1031 exchanges, and extracted tax-free cash through refinancing. Under Section 114, when Marcus's heirs inherit his real estate portfolio, the tax basis of every single property automatically steps up to the fair market value at the date of his death. This stepped-up basis mechanic completely erases decades of accumulated capital gains taxes with a single legal stroke. If Marcus purchased an asset for $300,000 that grew to $1 million at the time of his death, his heirs inherit the asset at a new tax basis of $1 million. If his children decide to sell the property the very next day for $1 million, their taxable capital gain is exactly zero. Alternatively, his heirs can choose to hold the real estate portfolio, execute a cash-out refinance to extract hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax-free liquidity, and use that capital to acquire new income-producing assets while tenant rents continue to pay down the debt. The accumulated wealth is transferred intact across generations, completely unburdened by estate liquidation or capital gains taxation. When you step back and look at the broader picture, a sobering reality becomes clear. The housing market in the United States has not failed. It is functioning with exact precision according to the economic principles and legal statutes written into the financial system. The middle-class wage earner operates in a system designed to tax labor heavily, incentivize consumer debt, and erode cash savings through persistent monetary inflation. The asset controller operates in a parallel system designed to reward asset ownership, shield capital flow from taxation, leverage tenant-funded debt, and preserve generational wealth through corporate structures. Julian works 40 hours a week to earn cash wages, pays the highest tax rates on his earnings, saves devaluing paper currency, and takes on personal debt to purchase a home that costs him money every month. Marcus designs a capital system where tenants pay off his debt, the tax code eliminates his tax liability, monetary inflation debases his liabilities while elevating his asset values, and legal structures protect his holdings from outside threats. The difference between Julian and Marcus was never intelligence, hard work, or personal merit. The difference was systemic literacy, understanding the exact mechanics of how money, debt, taxes, and legal structures interact in the real world. The traditional path of saving wages to buy a home with a 30-year mortgage is no longer enough to build lasting security in an economy driven by monetary expansion and institutional capital. True financial sovereignty requires moving from the earned income treadmill to the asset control matrix, mastering the hidden rules that separate those who pay for the system from those who own it.